How amazing was that set? I will say, I've heard you play the qanun before, but I've never heard you actually as part of a bigger ensemble. And I think that truly blew me away. My name is Rami. And I'm here with AFIKRA. We are a global organization that's dedicated to promoting curiosity around the Arab world and Arab culture. You can find us at afikra.com. And as part of AFIKRA, we have a podcast called Quarter Tones. And Quarter Tones is dedicated specifically to Arabic music in the past, present, and future. And so we're very lucky to interview artists that work sort of within the Arab sphere. Many of them are here actually tonight. Firas Zreik is here somewhere.
I saw him, yeah.
We also interviewed you yesterday, an amazing Iraqi artist. So you should join our website or listen to Quarter Tones wherever you listen to your podcast or on YouTube. And as part of Quarter Tones, we also interviewed you a while ago. And so if you're curious to really do a deep dive into your work, I encourage everybody to go there. So for everybody who doesn't know you here in the audience, tell us a little bit about yourself. So as Mira said, you're from Palestine. So what was your journey from Palestine to New York?
It went through Boston. I know New Yorkers don't like that word a lot. I auditioned right after high school to Berklee College of Music, and I got a full scholarship, and I thought I should go. And I came here when I was 19 of age, and I stayed there for 5 years, did 2 degrees. One in...
You were a young musician.
What's that?
So you were a young musician.
It's a relative word, yeah. And so I was there for 5 years, did a degree in performance and in jazz composition. And that was like a gate to so many different, realms of music. And right after Boston, I came to New York and settled here. It was 1 week before COVID. And, I was happy, to kick off my career as a freelance, independent, international musician. And I had, 6 months ahead of gigs and dates. I was nervous, but I was mostly excited. And 2 things happened. On the night of my flight, I was in Palestine, celebrating Christmas. On the night of my flight, I fell down and I broke my wrist. And, if you're a musician, you know what that means. It means total depression. It's the worst thing that can happen. It was difficult. I canceled my flight, canceled all the gigs, and I got stuck there recovering in Palestine. But in a way, it was, the recovery was healthy. It kind of helped me, steer into a new mood. So I overcame it, and then I came back to New York, I did 1 gig, and then lockdown happened. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to fight the planet. But it was a great experience for all musicians. It was scary, but it was pretty historical to be here. Because we all started finding alternatives. We all started working on projects that were, in the drawers or outstanding. And so I recorded an album and released it. I recorded another album that's yet to be released. I worked on so many singles, as well as I started teaching online. And suddenly I have students from Europe, from the Gulf, from the Middle East, from the States. So it was like a time to reflect and to kick off a new, career, basically.
Amazing. And so did you grow up playing the qanun?
Yeah, I started when I was 11. My first instrument was cello, actually. I studied classical cello for 3 years. Yeah, or cello. But then I really loved the cello, and I think it benefited me tremendously in terms of musical vocabulary and discipline and all this package you get with Western classical. It was excellent training. However, I did feel something was missing in the expressiveness in terms of, fully identify with my geography. And cello is an amazing instrument, but it didn't really reflect truly who I was. And so I moved to qanun, and I think it was a big leap. Because suddenly when I first heard that first quarter tone, which is the in-between notes, the notes that you don't have on a piano, between the white and black keys. It's all the out-of-tune notes that you heard tonight. When I first produced that sound, it was an unforgettable feeling because it makes you feel that you can play so many of the folk music around you, so many of the classical Arabic music around you that you grew up on.
Absolutely. By show of hands, who here grew up in the Arab world? Okay, so quite a few. I do want to spend some time talking about the qanun because I think it's a very specific instrument. It's honestly an instrument that I miss the most, sort of seeing, when we look at performances here, because growing up in the Middle East, you'd always see it sort of behind the diva. It was like there was the diva, and then there was the qanun.
The diva, man.
Right? And qanun, it comes from the same Greek root as canon. It's essentially setting it sets the register or it sets the tone. So tell us a little bit about that instrument and your relationship with it.
Well, yeah, in the Arabic music context, you were right. Qanun, its main function is to accompany voice. And that was the main function of any musical instrument. Because if you think about it, the vocal cords is the oldest and first instrument ever. So everything that came behind it came to complement it, not to replace it. But with time, the repertoire evolved and the composers evolved and each instrument got its own, glory, such as the violin, piano, cello. And so in Arabic music context, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure there are examples of qanun soloists at the time, but we don't know because there was no recordings. And Arabic music is an oral tradition, meaning they didn't notate music. So think about the tremendous amount of music that was lost in the past, I don't know, ever, 1,500 years. But my main, input is to take the qanun to somewhere where it can be the diva, It can be the lead. And I think it deserves it because it has tremendous capacities. It can comp, it can lead, it can play rhythm, it can play harmonies, it can play, so much. And it has so many frequencies. It's like the piano or the harp, but in a Mediterranean version.
Yeah, and we saw that so well sort of featured today. I think everybody here believes that it really has that potential. So tell us a little bit, how did you then build the rest of the ensemble around the qanun? How did you pick those instruments and those specific sounds?
That's a good question. I think the music dictates the instruments and not vice versa. There's a great saying by Stravinsky. They once asked him, how did you become so good at orchestration? He said, because I don't orchestrate. Is when I write the music, I'm hearing it in a flute, I'm hearing it in a sax, I'm hearing it in so on and so on. So I think that's one. That's when you write the composition itself, you should try to imagine what would make it work. But that's not always the case. I also play with a different kind of setup, which is more acoustic and more traditional Arabic Eastern, like with a oud, with a nai, which is the Arabic bamboo flute, with a violin, with Arabic percussion. But I think growing up, I was exposed to so many musical styles, and of course, when I came to Berkeley, it's evolved a lot. And so I think musicians' true identity is reflected in what they heard over the years, and not necessarily where they're from. You know what I mean? So I listen to a lot of international music: Brazilian music, flamenco, Turkish music, jazz, Western classical, you name it. And I think that was reflected in my compositions and in my arrangements. Today, I was just trying to have sustained instruments such as the sax and the flute to contrast the plucked sound of the qanun. And the bass, I really loved having acoustic bass. We actually tried both basses in both rehearsals, and they both work greatly. But there's something about the upright, which you saw today, that complements the frequencies of the qanun more than electric. Guitar is mostly two functions: to create that harmonic platform to complement the melody, as well as to double some of the melodies. And the drums, drums is king.
When we interviewed you for Quarter Tones, you also mentioned that you were listening at the time to Aziza Mustafazadeh, who's an Azerbaijani artist. And tonight I really felt that resonance because there's the presence of the string instrument, so distinctly Oriental, so recognizable. But then overlaid with it is either the bassoon or the saxophone or the trombone, and that contrast between the two is so powerful. And I've never, I don't think anybody has ever seen that done with the qanun. It's usually with another.
Yeah, that's a good catch. Aziza Mustafazadeh is definitely one of my big influences growing up. She's an Azerbaijani pianist, grew up in Germany, and she did a lot of she's mostly a jazz classical pianist. However, her father Vagif was a maqam master, or a mugam in Azerbaijan they call it. So you can hear that reflected in her music, and she was a big influence. But so many other influences, like Paco de Lucia, for instance. I've been listening a lot to Yamandu Costa. He's a Brazilian guitarist. I think he played at Jazz Pub a few months ago. Jazz is a big, school for me, as well as Bach, Sumbati, Kulthum. I mean, there's so many schools to just learn from. It's so inspiring. It's endless.
During the pandemic, I saw you. I remember you were doing these compositions where you were playing all the different instruments yourself and sort of like essentially it's an orchestra of yourself. Playing the piano and playing the oud, or the qanun and overlaying all these instruments. Is that how you create? Is that how you visualize the music?
Well, sometimes the instrument does take you to a place that other instrument wouldn't take you. So if I'm playing on the piano, it might take me to a different direction in terms of melodic structure or harmonic structure, more to say. Qanun is something else, oud is something else. Sometimes you don't need an instrument because most of the musical intellect comes from the mind. So the instrument is really just a device. But the instrument that you master or choose to master should be an extension of your body. You should be so fluent at it that it is the most expressive tool you have. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't try other instruments for your own sake or for your own to provoke other musical ideas that wouldn't have come otherwise. Like, for instance, the piece you heard today, it was called Ambivalent. It was the first time we played it. I actually wrote that on a melodica, which is a keyboard like this that you blow in. And I don't think I would have got that melody if I was just playing qanun. So definitely different instruments bring you to different dimensions, and I encourage any musician to try and play with different instruments, not to pretend that they master it, just for their own knowledge and fun.
Where would you like to see the qanun go where it hasn't gone yet?
I want to see the diva singing behind the qanun. Well, one of my big ambitions is writing a qanun concerto, and to leave something for other generations of qanun players to look up to, something, to have a repertoire. Because growing up, I didn't have a repertoire. I had to transcribe so many things. I mean, so many musicians here know that Arabic music is an oral tradition like jazz. So you listen and you imitate. You listen, you imitate. And unfortunately, 99.9% of the repertoire is vocal. And so, the brilliance of an instrumentalist mainly comes from soloing in between songs, which we call taqsim, the art of improvisation in a maqam tradition. And so any music nerd have so many recordings of taqsims from the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, and so on, from their favorite instrumentalists. And I did that. I imitated and I transcribed, and I had a vocabulary suddenly. But I want to create a bigger repertoire for other generations to be able to, play this specific piece that was specifically written for qanun. So I see the qanun in a much bigger place.
Amazing. All right. Well, on behalf of me and I think everybody else in this room, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Rami. Thank you, everyone.
Sharing your talent with us.
Lovely night. Thank you. Thank you so much.